The March international break is over, which means the run home in the A-League has begun. Auckland may have already just about locked up the Premier's plate, but their Kiwi status means that the carrot of an Asian Champions League elite place falls to second, heaping the importance of a top two finish on the chasing pack. There's still only 3 points separating second to fifth, so there's plenty of hats in the ring, whilst the overall battle for finals positions is beginning to come into focus. And if you really want to, the Mariners' win over Perth takes them within 1 point of climbing out of the Australia Cup playoffs. No matter how far you zoom out though, it was impossible not to be enthralled by the weekend's action. Harry Sawyer's stoppage time goal ensured that the Bulls nicked a point against the Jets in a result that helped neither side in their quest for top six. Some Marco Tilio brilliance helped City to a crucial victory over the Sky Blues, and victories emboldened Socceroos duo with the difference in one of the most topsy-turvy and entertaining original rivalries we've ever seen. If only their whole supporter base were there to see it, on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil, and I'm today joined by Jacob Stevens, whose voice is a little bit sore after his return flight home from Melbourne on the weekend. How are you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Yeah, as you can probably hear, it's a bit croaky today. Not as bad as it was yesterday. I can at least get a sentence out now, but it's well worth it though. I do enjoy a good away day, and when it's a game like that as well, just tremendous fun. You know, even though it was a loss for Adelaide, you know, it was still just such a good fun time out, and a great game of football as well. So.
It was. I usually sit with my dad on kind of the west side, kind of in the middle of the pitch. And we've always kind of talked occasionally about going and sitting behind the south end. And I just thought, what a perfect opportunity to sit a couple of bays over from you and your brother and Antonis, and just, have a little bit of banter back and forth the entire time. It was lots of fun, and very satisfied that Victory managed to get with a win in the end. Christian Montegan, hello to you as well. For the first time, I think we can actually say that we've all been in a game of football, which is new.
Yeah, it is, but I couldn't really celebrate or do anything. I had to be civil in the media box. I had to, couldn't celebrate, couldn't do anything like that. So whilst you both were, enjoying the moment, 8 goals in it, it was, really entertaining game of football from start to finish. So, I mean, for Victory, it's a really, really important result. And for Adelaide, on the flip side, it's not looking good in terms of finals, trying to make that top 6.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get stuck into the thick of it, just to let you know, this is the last day. If you're listening on Tuesday, the shirts, the kits, the Round Ball Australia home kits, thank you to everyone who's picked one up so far. Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Is the final day for orders, and then they're closing for good. So if you've been thinking about it and you're listening to this on Tuesday, this is your last chance. But the good news is you won't have to hear from us again regarding the shirts. So you can use Round Ball 10 for 10% off. And then after today, we'll be closed, we'll be done.
We've just got to find something else to plug.
Yeah, I guess so. Find something else to plug. I'm sure we'll find a way. But look, they're really cool. And that's it. But let's get stuck into the football. It was, as Christian, you said, it was an insane game. And not just the fact that there were so many goals, Jacob, but the fact that it went from Adelaide early opener, Victory 2-1, Adelaide 3-2, Victory 4-3, and then the seal on top as well. It was just that perfect script, that kind of soap opera game of football, all of the drama that you could want, and obviously the packed out away end just kind of made it as well. It was just such an entertaining game.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a couple of times already this season, but the original rivalry is the best fixture in the league. And that's not even being biased, but I think this game just goes to show it, right? Packed out away, and like you said, a fantastic atmosphere, even with a relatively small crowd. I think it was only 10,000 total in attendance, which is, obviously probably about half of what you'd be looking for this fixture. But it was still, I thought, a fantastic atmosphere regardless. And a back and forth game of football, kind of reminiscent of the game the two played earlier this season, right? Where it was a similar type of script where, it was one team would get ahead and the other would then fight back, and, late goals and great attacking football. Perhaps not the most fantastic defending from both sides, but, it was entertaining nonetheless. And I think what it shows as well is why these two teams are in the position they're in this season, right? Is that they're sort of susceptible to these sorts of games. Obviously, Adelaide a lot very recently. 10 goals in the last 2 games conceded, 1 win in the last 9. But Victory have had their moments this season as well, where they've had games and streaks like this where they've been a little bit shaky, but in this one they were able to come away with it. So, it's a massive 3 points for them, because it starts to build that gap away from 6th spot, whereas Adelaide now are, obviously lucky that Sydney dropped the points to City, couldn't get the win there. So that there's still a 3-point gap. But yeah, it was just such a great, awesome game of football for the neutral, for both sets of fans. Adelaide fans being in the away bay. Everyone thought that Adelaide had it in the bag there for a little while, and it was a really jovial atmosphere. And then obviously those last 10 minutes, and it just the script was flipped completely. It's you can't write this sort of stuff, and it just sort of was the hallmark of what was a crazy crazy round of football in what's been a crazy month of football for the A-League as well, with some of the games that we've seen. It's been a lot of these sorts of scorelines, a lot of these back and forth entertaining games, and I think what it did is actually put on display, like you said, Lockie, in the intro, some of those players who perhaps needed to vindicate themselves and start to have those performances at club level. And I think that they did that, right? So obviously you had Daniel Arzani and Nishan Velupillay for Victory were tremendous all game long. Nish was a goal and 2 assists for him. Yep. That's an incredible impact from him. Daniel Arzani just had Kito on skates the whole game, cutting inside, obviously got that fantastic goal. And then even Johnny Yole, right, for Adelaide, he's been one of those players that everybody's spoken about. He's got this talent, he's got this promise, he could be such a good player, but he's never put it together. But you saw the class that he had with that goal, right? The footwork to be able to get it away from the defender, create the space for the shot, and to hit it like that on, the half volley with his left foot. Really powerfully. Hopefully that's one of those things where he can then push on from that and continue to develop and take confidence from that. So yeah, I think it was a game, while maybe for football purists wasn't the best display of football, it was great entertainment, and I think it gave an opportunity to some of those players who thrive in those moments to really show up and make a name for themselves. So yeah, you can't complain too much. It was a great game of football and a great advert for the league.
That's a very interesting line you just closed with, because it's going to lead into my next question to you, Christian, because we talk about, crowds a lot, and crowds can always be better. We know that. But, you get people that come along to a game like this and you get entertained like that. It doesn't always happen in football, right? It's a low-scoring game for a reason, and it makes these anomalies stand out even more, right? And it just becomes this big thing. What do you make of it? Is a 5-3 game, a football purist would look at that and say, well, it's just poor defending. It's not actually good football. It's not like the pure form of the game that you'd want to watch. But for a neutral fan, that's it. That is like the pinnacle. You're getting 2 sets of fans going hard at each other in a high-scoring match with lots of drama. That's what they want to see.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it both ways. I mean, I can definitely see from a purist perspective that from the naked eye, it wasn't really great viewing in terms of the actual football being played. But at the same time, I mean, there were a few players who stood out and actually made the game entertaining themselves, right? The likes of Velupillay and Arzani in particular, like that first half from him, watching him barely put a foot wrong, to be fair. But then you go back to what Jacob said about it's basically these teams opening up in terms of defensively, they give you those opportunities, right? And for a player like Arzani, he'll eat that up, right, every single day of the week. The skill he has, the talent, you can tell the spaces he opened up, in behind, out wide on the wings, he was combining, with some really good passing. That second goal as well from the wing, that started from him where he opened up the space, played a couple of 1-2 passes, and then the goal led to Velupillay putting it away for 2-1. So, I mean, yeah, you can look at it from, from both angles, but I guess it's the entertainment factor that I think Australian fans and the Australian public in particular, they care about the most. So like we're in Europe and we're really critical and analysing the game bit by bit and asking these real in-depth questions to coaches and not getting, battered as much as, the top clubs in world football, right? So I think Australian sport just loves a real theatre, a real spectacle, and we certainly got that with a 5-3 game. Even that second half, you can tell that the legs were starting to tire, more opportunities started to open up, and you wouldn't think so given that the game was 3-3 for maybe a 20-minute spell thereabouts. So you thought maybe it'd be a bit tighter. Both teams wouldn't want to give much away, but it was the complete opposite, really. There were still chances galore. And even if it ended 3-3, I don't think anyone could complain. Maybe you could argue that Victory did deserve it based on the clear-cut chances they did create compared to Adelaide, who were very efficient in front of goal and took their chances well. So, I guess a Victory win in the end was the right result, but 5-3 from an Adelaide point of view, it does seem a bit harsh.
I think the team selection is a big talking point here for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, the news came out for Victory, and it is completely different to anything we've seen this season, right? You have Josh Rawlins and Geordie Valadon, who've been away with the under-23s. He got a win and 2 draws, by the way, in their International Cup. But I don't know, that was clearly just a selection management fitness decision, right? Because they did play parts later in the match. So those two go out. You got Fabian Monge coming in for his first start of the season, Josh and Sarah, who's barely featured in the first team at all. Then Brandon Hamill steps out, but obviously he came on at half-time for Lachlan Jackson. And then, this kind of workaround shifts in Mashash into defensive midfield, which was very costly for them. Yeah. He put in a very poorly timed challenge to allow Johnny Yule to skip free for the opener, and then obviously the handball for the penalty as well. So it was a tough balance for them. In the end, they were massive risks that paid off because they did get the result. But obviously, Ryan Teague out with his little ankle as well. So that was difficult for the Victory. And they would have had, if they lost this game or dropped points, a few things to point to and say, well, we didn't have this, we didn't have him, and it kind of threw out our balance. And on the other side of the coin, Jacob, you have this Adelaide United side who, in the first kind of 4 to 5 weeks of this poor run of form, we were able to say those same things. You've got Dylan Piraeus out, who's been a very key player for them with illness, and you have Panakikianis and Luka Jovanovic off with the under-20s, among others, and there's kind of been these things to point to. But now we're at a point where all those players are back. Those excuses are out the window for Adelaide. You're a side that's conceded 18 goals in 5 games. One of those was a 1-1 draw. So that is an extremely, extremely poor goal conceding record. And it's almost like, where do you go now? They were so high and they've fallen so far. And it now looks like if anyone is going to drop out of the 6, it's going to be them.
But look, is it overly surprising given the fact that, only 1 or 2 clean sheets, I think, all season for Adelaide? It's been pretty clear cut that defending has been the issue all season long. It was the predominant issue last year as well, was the defensive side of things, and it's clear nothing much or not enough has been done to address those issues. Carl Veart even said as much post game, right? And he sort of touched on it. He was like, yeah, as a coaching staff, we need to do better defensively. We need to work on that. It's a bit late in the season to come to that realization, but it's a case of, okay, finally I think gotten to that root cause of maybe the coaching has just been the wrong approach this whole time, and that's why it's sort of reached this point. Because you look at Bart Vriends and you look at Panakikianis, and they're 2 quality centre-backs. There's no reason why this team should be conceding 5 goals a week, right? It's okay, I understand that the fullbacks are extremely attacking, so they're forwards a lot of the time, but then you've got a really good double pivot in front of them anyway. It just seems like what's happening is not down to the players in so much as it's down to the system and the coaching. And I think that's finally been realised and admitted by Carl Veart, which is kind of refreshing to see because he's kind of skirted the issue a little bit this year. But yeah, it's there's no excuses now, right? And I think maybe that's why he's come out and he's been able to say it, is that he can't point to anything else to say, oh, maybe it was this or maybe it was that. And you can't say, well, let's score more goals, because realistically, you can't expect your team to score 6 goals a week, right? I mean, three should be enough to get a point away from home against the Victory. And I do think, actually, going to what you were saying about the Victory with some of their team selections, I think it wouldn't be looked at as so weird if it was against any other team in the league, because they'd probably get the job done a lot more comfortably than against Adelaide. I think Adelaide being a very aggressive attacking team, and also it just being a rivalry match, it sort of adds that extra little bit of uncertainty to it, and it's going to make it a more tense and closer game. So I think, in hindsight, sure, Mashash as a 6, maybe not the best move going forwards, but I think if it was up against, I don't know, name a team, Wellington Phoenix, Central Coast Mariners, whoever, you get the job done without mistake, and everyone's like, oh, it's a genius move. Whereas now it's sort of looked back a little bit more harshly. But yeah, in terms of Adelaide and Carl Veart, it's been a long season, and it's echoed what happened last season, but it's just gone on for a lot longer, right? Where last season it was a good first 3 rounds of the season, and then the wheels fell off. This was a good first, 2/3 of a season almost, and then the wheels fell off. So I think that doesn't help, because there's the added expectation from the club, from the fans, probably from the players themselves as well, that hang on, we're in a title fight, we should be fighting for those top 2 spots, and now all of a sudden we're down in 6th, only safe by 3 points. And so that added pressure of it, when you then look at the results, it sort of puts it in a bad light, whereas perhaps this was the level that Adelaide should have been at the whole time, and they just had that streaky run of form to start with, and things got out of hand quickly. But yeah, for Carl, it's not been a good season, to be honest, and it's not been a good last couple of seasons. I mean, the club has made it pretty clear that they're expecting a top 4 finish, and it looks like that is basically out of the window at this point in time. So, there's now obviously rumours coming out about Carl's future at the club, so, you can't be too surprised to hear it.
So, Christian, you have this dynamic over in Adelaide where a lot of people are probably cognizant of the fact that they don't have the most reputable manager in Australian football in Carl Veart, but the trade-off of that has always been that he's someone who intimately knows the South Australian product line, and Adelaide United as a football club has worked with the youth team and knows these players probably better than anyone, right? And I guess the question that Ernest Faber, coming in as this new kind of sporting or technical director, whatever his official title is what is the trade-off worth it or not for Carl Veart to remain at the Adelaide United Football Club? And they have been a football club that generally make finals most years, and to miss out twice in a row would be a big deal for them. So then you have a performance reason to change the management as well. But if they do go on to make finals, even if they have a good run, then that all of a sudden that becomes a tough decision that would be quite controversial with fans if you chose to get rid of him. So what side of that coin do you sit on? Do you value his expertise in the local South Australian football much? Because it's a very different idea for Carl Veart to managing a Perth Glory to an Adelaide United. There is clear strengths at him being at the Reds.
There is, but I mean, he's been there for 5 years now, I believe. I think it was like 2020, 2021 that he was first appointed, right? So he has been there for a while. It's from the Adelaide board, it's like, okay, if we stick with Carl, do we just think of like a more of a long-term project, or like where is this going? Because if you want to go down that path of, okay, he's going to be the man to guide, this next section of the youth and develop them, really, give them first team minutes, it's going to take a while, isn't it? And you're going to have to really deal with those growing pains where you're going to miss out on finals some seasons, but it's about how the board manages those expectations. And for Adelaide fans, they always expect so much, right? They are a big club in the competition. They do expect to make finals every year, given the resource they do have. But again, it's like, which direction do you want to go in? They can't be split in two minds, whether, okay, we're going to focus on youth, but we want to, make top 2, we want to make top 4, we want to win championships. There's going to have to be a fine balance there. So whether they think Carl's the right fit moving forward, that's just about their planning and how they go about that, right? I think some fans I don't know about what Jacob thinks, because he's more in the sanctum than I am over there, but it feels as though, just generally looking from the outside, fans are starting to get a bit fed up now. Just the lack of goals being conceded, just the lack of effort being made to fix these defensive issues. Just one example of the many issues that have arisen from this Adelaide side in the past couple of seasons. And, you look at back when Carl had that really good run with Adelaide, I think it was 2 years ago, where they were absolutely flying, and you thought, okay, he's got some really good potential as a manager. But I mean, what have they done since? Like, they haven't really won anything under him over the past few seasons that he's been there. So that's why I go back to, he's been there for 5 years now. You've got to assess him overall and say, like, is there someone better out there suited to really, take this project to the next level? And if that's, focusing on developing these young players, which over years past, they have a lot of potential. You can make a lot of money, but it's about having the right coach in place and getting the most out of them. So, that flow-on effect to get the most money, transfer fees overseas, like all of these are massive decisions. So, again, is the right coach out there? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be too many. You can take a risk on a younger coach, perhaps, someone who's been there in the youth setup, maybe, but yeah, it's that fine line, that fine balance between managing expectations and what you want as your actual project.
I will say that on that point of, it seems like the fans have turned on Carl a little bit, but there's still a strong contingent that has a bit of sympathy for him because of the position he's been put in particular in this season, right? I mean, over the last few seasons, there's no denying he's had a very good squad and he's come close, right? He's made the semi-finals in the league, I think 3 times. He's made a cup semi-final. Like, those are very, very good results. There's no denying it, but he also had a very good squad. The likes of Craig Goodwin, Hiroshi Ibasuki, Nestor Irankunda, like Isaias when he's not 38 years old, Javi Lopez when he's not 37 years old, like you should be getting good results with those players, and he did, and there's fair dues for that, and there is a portion of the fan base that feels like he's not been supported by the club because, especially in the last couple of years, it's just been basically a fire sale and nobody's really been brought in, right? Like, okay, they needed to address the defense and they got rid of a lot of the defenders that were a part of the system last year, but they didn't really they brought in Bart Vriends and that was about it, right? Dylan Parias has come in, but again, I'll maintain he's not a defender and the role he's playing isn't a defensive one, so it's like there's not really been much support for him in that. So there are some fans who do feel a bit of sympathy for him in the situation he's been put in, but you're spot on, Christian, that a lot of people now are starting to perhaps realise that he's not quite up to it tactically, especially in a league that's now evolving as much as it is tactically, and that you need to be on top of those sorts of things, have good game plans, be able to be adjustable and make changes during games, is something that Veart just has never really been able to do that much of. And it was very noticeable in this game as well, I thought. In the middle of that second half, it looked like Adelaide were tired and they were sloppy on the ball, and it felt like something needed to happen. He needed to bring somebody on, inject a bit of energy back into the game, and just nothing happened. And it just was, Adelaide just stalled out for that last 20, 15 minutes because no changes were being made and no energy was being put onto the pitch. And that's, one of those failings that I think people are starting to realise now, that the club is going on this run of form where they're conceding a lot of goals and they're not getting results. So, yeah, it's perhaps a bit bittersweet, right? Because Carl Veart, he's a club legend, really nice guy. The players love him. The fans love the energy that he brings to the game. But I think also the writing's been on the wall for a little bit, because if you notice him on the sidelines, normally he's always screaming and shouting and he's up and he's, pointing and giving instructions and things like that. But over the last, few games, he's been quite resigned, sitting in his chair, a little bit more relaxed. And it was quite noticeable as well in after this game. He was the only person from the club that didn't come over to say hello to the away fans as well. All the players did, other members of staff, the subs who weren't used, like everybody came over except for Carl. So, I think the writing, perhaps a little bit on the wall there in that regard. But definitely the fans are starting to turn a little bit on him. And it kind of was, coincided as well with Mark Milligan leaving. I think once he left, people were like, right, okay, it's all Carl now. So let's see how he goes. And, it's been pretty downhill almost since Mark Milligan left. So, it's been a long developing thing. And it's going to be a shame, right? He's the club's longest tenured manager. That's a crazy stat, right? This club has had some great coaches in its history, and Carl is the one who has led it for the longest period of time. And like I said, he's come so close on so many occasions. But as you both touched on, it's a club that, okay, it's a relatively small one in terms of, the market size and the population of the city and things like that. But there's a rich history of football in this part of the country, and a rich history of success as well with Adelaide United, and a lack of success over 5 years. Not winning a single trophy. It's not a great look. And I think there's a point in time where you have to start to cut your losses. And while I maintain that perhaps this is already too late to have done so, it's better late than never.
Just cutting in to the main podcast now. I'm here with Poletti. We thought it was important to cut aside a little bit of time to talk about a very important issue which raised its head throughout the weekend. When Victory took on Adelaide in what was the Pride Cup and one of the best original rivalries of all time on Saturday night, they did so without the most of the leadership of the North Terrace in attendance. Instead of leading the active support through one of the club's most important matches of the season, a select few, according to News Corp's Ben Higgins, were at Victory's NPL game in Shepparton, allegedly shouting homophobic slurs at opposition players. Now, there are many arguments against the existence of the Pride Cup. Number one, that politics doesn't belong in sport. Number 2, that if we're having a round celebrating queer people, why don't we have a round for every demographic of people in society? And number 3, that people already know that they are welcome in football and that we don't need to keep talking about it. All 3 of these arguments fail to hold much weight. Politics is intertwined in the fabric of sport. Just ask the Australian government, who is spending $600 million supporting a PNG rugby league team to strengthen geopolitical ties in the Pacific. Or ask any of the thousands of people pitching Perry Park to the Queensland government for redevelopment under the 2032 Olympic Delivery Plan. Anyone who thinks politics and sport don't mix isn't paying very close attention. Secondly, yes, having a round for every different segment of society is a silly notion, but that's not what this is. These rounds are often designed to bring education and awareness to particular cross-sections of our diverse culture who have historically been targeted and discriminated against because of who they are. Myself, as a straight white male, have never had to walk into a sports club forced to hide who I am out of fear of what might happen if I didn't. I don't need a round to make me feel safe at the football, but for many LGBTQI plus people, that is not the case. Josh Cavallo made history as one of the first male professional footballers to come out as gay, who revealed recently he still receives daily death threats because of his identity. How welcome in football do you think Josh feels? Everyone should be welcome in football, sport, and the world. We would love to live in a world where Pride Round is no longer a necessity. However, certain members of the football circles have proved this week that that world is not the one we currently live in right now. Poletti, there is a lot going on in here, and we know that this is an issue particularly close to your heart as well. I thought it would be valuable if you shared a little bit about your experience and your impact from some of the actions, not just with the North Terrace as well, but from the league's interaction with Pride Round this year as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lockie. So for those who don't know, and as I've found out recently, there are still plenty of people who consume roundball content that don't know. I am non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. But, having the name Poletti isn't just, something unique and different using one name. It is something that I take very close and dear to my heart, that I deliberately chose to help me feel like my more authentic self. That, so, yeah, this is quite close to my heart. Because this is who I am every day. This is not. I said this a couple of weeks ago at the Sydney FC Pride celebrations when they had their home game to someone. Yes, I dressed up a little bit extra for the day, but this is who I am. I will turn it up to 11 sometimes, but I don't get to take off a rainbow shirt and just go back to living the life of a straight white male, because that's not who I am. It's never been who I am, and it took me a very long time to realize who I was. And I've been to football games where I've heard homophobic abuse. I've been subject to some of that homophobic abuse from people. This is not, it's not something that goes away. It's something that is there. It's why these things exist. And if it's been tough, because this year, throughout the Pride celebrations, and for those who follow me on Blue Sky, will have seen a lot of what I've said, but it's lacked that genuineness, it's lacked that authenticity, and it's felt slightly like it is a box-ticking exercise for some of the clubs who have participated, presuming they even participated at all, and there were some clubs that did very little, almost like they did the bare minimum. I know there was at least one club that did nothing. So it's how you can call it a league-wide Pride celebration when, that is the case, has just absolutely baffled me. And it seemingly was only, besides the Adelaide and Melbourne victory game, seemingly only the home teams that did anything outside of the away team maybe wearing the Pride armband, which at this point it's almost the bareness. It's almost the basic at this point. It seemed like it was only the Pride celebrations for home teams and nothing for the away teams to do anything, which I thought is odd, particularly when you look at Sydney FC, who had the bespoke jersey. They were the only team to have a bespoke jersey, because I don't consider having rainbow numbers a bespoke jersey at this point. That's that's a story for a different day. They did nothing when they went down to Canberra, who were having their Pride celebration in 2024. Sydney FC at home, all the players wore I think it was rainbow scrunchies in their hair. So there's nothing to say that they couldn't have done that again, or whether it be socks or something or whatever. So, but they weren't the only club to not do something when they hit the road this season. There's basically every club. So yeah, it's been interesting to say the least, and I use that in probably the most negative way that one can use the term interesting. But to go back to what happened on Saturday, so I was in the midst of calling 2 NPL Women's New South Wales games. One kicked off at 3 p.m, one kicked off at 6:30 p.m. Between games, I was looking at different small portions of social media. I think it was Christian alerted it to my attention that there was a rumour that had started to float around before kickoff of the Adelaide and Victory game, that the North Terrace were boycotting because it was the Pride Cup game.
Sorry, just really quickly for some clarification there. It was some of the leadership, yeah. So obviously there were still people in the terrace, and no one has actually specifically confirmed that it was Pride Cup. I feel like that's important to say, but you can read between the lines a little bit.
Yeah. So I sort of just floating around social media a little bit at different points between the two games. Put it out there, hadn't confirmed it. It was in response to what someone else had posted. It was about the crowd, actually, for the doubleheader. There were people, presumably season ticket holders. I mean, I can't imagine that if you're part of the North Terrace who weren't at this game, that you're paying single game tickets every single week. It cost you a fortune. I imagine you've paid for the whole season. So, those seats couldn't even be sold to people had they wanted to attend. It was then confirmed later that, those people had chosen not to turn up to the game. And then there was the men's side not wearing the rainbow numbers, but the women's side had. And the club came out and said that the A-League women players had requested that. But, the plans were to just focus a lot around education and inclusivity sessions and all of that. Corporate stuff that, let's face it, as part of their partnership with Pride Cup, they've done for the last 2 years. They've done it basically every single year since this whole thing started. So how much extra they were actually doing this year is potentially up for debate. I don't imagine we'll know the full scale of all of those discussions or anything that's gone on, but it seemed like it was very much a just push it under the radar and hope no one notices and no one says anything.
So let me pose a question to you here, right?
Yep.
Because I wanted to represent some different schools of thought here. There are plenty of examples around the world of people disagreeing with Pride celebrations for religious or cultural reasons, and there are examples of that in the A-League as well. And to a certain extent, I believe personally that if we're expecting people to be open-minded about certain issues like Pride and like all these different issues that we talk about, then to some extent we have to be aware of the fact that people live in very different worlds to us, and it is hard for some people to do that, and we also have to be accepting of that, right? And part of what Pride Cup is awareness, and that comes down to the different coloured kits and having the Pride Cup and the trophy celebration and all that kind of things. And then the other part of that is education. It feels like the education thing, as much as you can say it's been similar to the last few years, that's not a bad thing for me if it's consistent and good education.
I'm not saying necessarily it's a bad thing, but I think when you look at what the Victory have done in the past 2 seasons to then come out and do this, like in 2023, they had the blackout kit. In 2024, they had the warm-up top that was originally supposed to be worn but wasn't in-game for, I think it was because Adelaide chose to do their own kit that was predominantly white in colour, so they couldn't exactly wear it in-game. So I'm saying it seems like they've gone backwards, is what I'm saying.
For sure. And so my question here is, you got the two parts of it, the education and the awareness part. Is there any scope for saying that, well, actually, because we've been doing for the Pride Cup for a long time, the awareness is there, and as long as the education continues, is that a palatable outcome in your mindset?
So I think the way I look at it, I look at it from two different perspectives here. I'm going to look at it from a league-wide perspective, but I'm also going to look at it from a club-specific perspective. So from the club-specific perspective, I made this same criticism about Adelaide as well. If you've gone from having a Pride jersey to not having a Pride jersey, it seems like you're going backwards. I'm not necessarily like I think if you start small, get bigger, or just keep the same, then I think that's fine. You can change up the design, whatever. But I think to not include something means that in some respects you're going backwards. And for any players specifically, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable wearing a jersey for whatever reason, what you have to remember is that you're there to do a job and you're there to represent a club. You've signed a contract. If you want to sit out the game, that's fine, but I don't think you can dictate. And I'm not saying any player has or has not dictated to the club that I don't want to play if I have to wear this. I think if you've signed a contract to represent a club and this is the values that the club hold, then as an employee of that club, it'll almost be like me going to a job and then just choosing not to wear the uniform because I don't like it, right? I think that's probably the best comparison I can make there. Everyone gets emboldened on social media, right? They'll leave comments saying, "Oh, I'm never coming back to the club. I'm gone," and then they'll forget about it 2 weeks later when they've moved on to whatever's upsetting them now, right? Or whatever's getting them irrationally angry now, and they come back. They forget about it. But queer people don't forget how you treat them in those moments. If you give in to the haters, to the homophobes, the transphobes, whatever it is, we don't forget that. It's, and while they may come back 2 weeks later, we might not. And I think a lot of us, I know a lot of people who haven't come back because clubs and sporting organisations and leagues haven't stood up for them. The numbers all speak for themselves. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's something like 17% of people, don't. Only 17% of queer people feel safe at a sporting event. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. Something I probably should have prepared, but like the number is very small, and that's part of what these education sessions that delivered to the clubs go to do is to help people understand. And I'd like to see it be done more with fans, not just putting numbers out on the website, but like for people like these people who from the North Terrace, the club, like I know a lot of clubs have a very good relationship with their active support. There's no, I can't imagine these people aren't known to the club. Get them in, sit down with them, talk to them. If they're open to it, to at least learning, that they might not agree at the end of it, but they might understand more. And I think ultimately that's all you can ask for with those sorts of people, whether ultimately they end up thinking it's just a political issue, which it's not. It's a human rights issue. There's still so many countries around the world where being homosexual is criminalized, and that's before you even get to, transphobe, transgender, etc., etc. 2030, the World Cup is going to be partially in Morocco, where it is still illegal to be homosexual. We just had it in Qatar, where it is illegal to be homosexual. Saudi Arabia, it is illegal to be homosexual, and I don't think anyone needs a history lesson on what's going on in the United States right now and what may or may not happen come the 2026 World Cup if the current trajectory continues in that country. So that is a big part of why it is still important to have Pride rounds, to have, as the A-League terms it, the Pride celebrations that went over multiple weeks this season. I just think it needs to be done a lot better, and I think given in the lead-up, Victory was certainly a lot more quieter on social media this year, I would say, with the amount of posts and communications and everything that they put out. I think if the club had have come out and got on the front foot and explained why it was only going to be the A-League women's side wearing numbers, if they'd have been proactive in explaining, I think there would have been a lot less backlash to this situation.
All right, Poletti, thank you for this discussion. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Nice, thank you.
Well, in terms of their short-term aspirations, their finals chances are likely going to be determined this weekend. It's a massive game against Sydney FC, who, they're the two teams on either side of this finals cut as we sit today. So Adelaide have 3 points on Sydney, but are down by 9 on goal difference. So a Sky Blue win would propel them into the top 6 and kick Adelaide out of it. Christian, we're going to talk about Sydney's game against Melbourne City in a second, but looking forwards to Adelaide v Sydney, this looks like it can be billed as a top 6 cutoff, right? If Adelaide managed to get the win here and say Wanderers pick up at least 1 point, Sydney are then going to be 6 points outside of the finals positions with 4 games to play. That is a monumental gap to overcome, but if they are able to get a result here, then they almost turn into the box seat over Adelaide United in terms of picking up that finals position.
Yeah, definitely massive game away from home here in Adelaide, but Adelaide is just so vulnerable. Like, you've got to tip no one else but Sydney to get this win. Yeah. But, on the flip side, right, you've got Sydney going to have that travel to Singapore against the Sailors 4 days after that game against Adelaide. So how does Ufuk Talay manage that starting 11 in his squad, his rotations? That's going to be a big question mark because now, like I said last week, they've got less games now to have a security blanket and rest some of these players, right? Whereas they've got to win as many games as possible, being 3 points behind Adelaide, albeit a much better goal difference, as you alluded to, Lockie. It's desperate times now. So with that, there's going to be more risk of injuries, more risk of tiredness, more risk of fatigue. And this is the position ultimately that they put themselves in, right? Games that they should have won on paper, which they didn't get across the line, and it's left them in this big hole that they've got to scrape, as many 3 points as possible. So, it's going to be a really fascinating match. From recent memory, Sydney do have the better of Adelaide. They have the edge, especially away from home. I could be wrong there, but just from memory. So, they do have that slight that confidence boost behind them. But in saying that, like, you've got Adelaide, who, yes, they need a win as well, but on current form, they've been terrible, especially defensively. Like, they're just shipping in goals for fun, even at home. So Sydney, looking at this, I doubt that they'd rest players, albeit that Adelaide haven't been in good form, but it's just going to be really fascinating to see those starting lineups and how Talay approaches it, right? So, it's just a massive game because a loss for Sydney, and basically you can sort of write their name off for finals.
Yeah, which is crazy because, they are the team that most people, including me, I think you two as well, had, or maybe not you, Christian, the Wanderers.
Christian had the Wanderers.
As premiers, as premiers for this season. But we see them at their best, and for me, at their best, they're still the best team in the competition, right? But they're not hitting that peak anywhere near consistently enough. And having that potential still means that if they are able to sneak into finals and, you play your way through May in good form, then you can still win a championship. But you have to be there in the first place, obviously. And Christian, I'll come back to you because this game against Melbourne City was another opportunity to get 3 points, and they were well in the fight. And it's just another one of those games where it's kind of like the what if. And, Melbourne City are a very good side now. I think we know that. But, they had their chances. Jordan Courtney-Perkins off the header. Douglas Costa with a little bit of brilliance. It took 2 quite inspired assists from Marco Tilio to split them open. And Sydney again, it's just a story of you could have easily won this game. And, that is now stacked up 7, 8, 9 times maybe over the course of this season. And they should be a squad that is competing in all competitions. If the Mariners can do it last year, Sydney FC can definitely do it this year. And while they are having that success and they do have to go balance these games with the ACL2 semi-final as well, it's been really disappointing, and we keep waiting for this moment where they're going to finally spring into gear and jump their way into 4th or 5th, but it's just not happened yet.
I was one of those people. I've been constantly waiting for this team to show up. I had them in my prediction to win. Of course, they lose. Did not expect that at all. But, I mean, the game was there for them. It's just in that second half, I thought the City took over a bit. And it's the likes of like Klamala. If he doesn't show up, I thought he had an average game here against City. Came off, I think, around the 60th minute mark. And it's when things aren't going right for them, it just seems as though they just can't find those answers where they should. On paper, they've got such a talented squad, right? They've got so much potential. Douglas Costa's played really well the past few weeks. He's shown his best football, even in this game with his goal. Really great productivity. But besides him, when it's not clicking, you can tell that once they get on the back foot, it's hard for them to really gain that momentum back. And I thought City controlled the game really well towards the back end of that second half in particular to close out the game, got the 3 points. And City look like a really, really dangerous side now with some of the players they've got back. Max Caputo is a good example. They've got really someone in that number 9 position to really solidify that place, that starting spot, a player to really work around. Whereas there was a bit of in and out, a bit of uncertainty there. So I think now with a really settled squad and a starting lineup, I think Vidmar can really use this as a really good stepping stone heading into finals, which basically you'd think they will make now. So they're going to be a really, really dangerous threat, and I don't think anyone will want to play them. That's for sure, whether home or away from home. So for Sydney though, it's just disappointing because you both had them, tipped as premiers. So it just shows they're in 7th place. I mean, no one in their right mind would have expected that, right? So, and again, I've mentioned that Asia has played a bit of a factor with the travel involved. They've made the semis now, and of course we want them to go as deep as possible in Asia. But I would have thought that they would have had the depth in their squad to balance out both competitions, right? I thought they would have been that kind of team to do it, but inevitably it just hasn't been the case, unfortunately, for them. So it's about that balancing act. Again, it's about the lineups and about resting players. It's about finding that chemistry now heading into finals if they even make it. But this game against Adelaide in particular, it's just massive in terms of it's basically a 6-pointer really. So it's going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely huge. And I know I mentioned his name already, but Marco Tilio, Jake, is another one of those players that has returned from injury, I think about 2 months ago now. But his impact on the team since coming in has been immense. And, the 2 assists that he got on the weekend are just examples of his class and, how he broke away in, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not quite that long, 2-3 years ago.
Years ago.
Yeah, in that Melbourne City side that got him his move to Celtic. And we're kind of starting to see glimpses of that form again that says, okay, maybe if he does go back at the end of the season after this loan completes, then maybe he just still does have a European future ahead of him.
Yeah, we've always been saying this season as well, I'll wait for some of these players to come back to City and let's see, what they can put together and how good they can be. And Tilio is one of those ones I think that he's kind of in that Arzani bracket of player, right? Call me out if you disagree, but sort of that player who got that move to Europe that didn't quite pan out, whether it was through injury or otherwise, and has come back and, is still, you can see the class, but has yet to really put it together. And obviously Arzani's been around a little bit longer, but Tilio, I think this game shows exactly what he's all about, right? He's such a game changer. And when you've got a player like that on the team who can just create those sorts of chances, I mean, those assists that he had were just incredible. And, it's one of those things where, you've got to be able to not protect these players in a way. perhaps in Tilio's case, yes, because he's always injured, but, you know, like be able to really get them back into the team and feeling comfortable and embed them really well. And I think that we've seen that now from City because, yeah, he's got such a big impact on the game when he does play. And in a side that's been sort of stuttering, you know, a lot of sides in that top six have been stuttering, but City, you know, have been stuttering in the final third of the pitch, whereas for a lot of these teams it's been at the other end. They've been sort of stop-start, not scoring a huge number of goals. Like I said, to have somebody like him who can create these chances, and he's just so dynamic and fun to watch on the ball. And I think that's one of those things where we sort of take it for granted when we have them, right? Is these players who are just tremendous technical players, really good ability on the ball. You know, when they go, you don't notice the impact they have on the game until they're gone, and that's Tilio in a nutshell, I think. So yeah, you know, a great player. City need to protect him. They need to be able to make sure that he's fit and raring and ready to go for the rest of the season, because, you know, come finals where it's going to be a game of inches, right? It's going to be a game of moments in finals, as it always is. Having somebody like Tilio who can, you know, break open that defense, who can play well against the low block, he plays well in transition as well. You know, just having that sort of ace up your sleeves, it can be such a huge advantage moving into those games where, you know, one mistake and you're out for good. So, it's promising signs for City now, and that they're starting to come back to form. And, you know, there was a lot of critique about them heading into the year. Was Vidmar the right man for the job? Were they going to be able to achieve anything? And while they've not quite perhaps hit the heights that they would have liked, or that they've sort of set for themselves over the years, you know, it's not like it was last year. They're kind of back in form a little bit, right? I'm saying they're a lock for finals at this point in time with the way that they've been playing. And, you know, like I said, you get Tilio back. That's huge. You know, you're embedding players like Matt Leckie back into the side as well. So, yeah, things are looking up for City at the moment.
Off the field as well, some interesting news. City have been welcoming a $10 million election promise for a new, the quote is mini stadium out in Casey. Sure, if that's how you want to describe it.
It's five-a-side only.
Yeah, it's five-a-side only. Well, it would be for the women's, youth, and potentially some pre-season men's fixtures as well. Feel free to have a laugh about the City Football Group being the one given money in the A-League if you want. I think that's fair, but good to see some investment in football. And for those still hanging out for more news on Perry Park as well, nothing really concrete out of the Brisbane Roar fan forum last Thursday. So it's still sit and wait on that one. But we'll move up to the top, because Auckland, they got their 2-0 win over Brisbane. And now my math says, Christian, they need 9 more points to lock up the Premier's play. And that is assuming that Western United, who are their closest competition, go perfect 5 from 5. So every time Western United drop points, you can drop that off the points target for Auckland as well. This win took them a long way towards that goal. And, you know, everything we've seen in the league this year says that Western United going from 5 from 5, not just Western United, but anyone going 5 from 5 is quite an unrealistic suggestion. So you'd have to think that Auckland looking pretty good, right?
They are, but they've got a tough fixture list, right? They've got Wanderers, Sydney, Victory, Perth, and Western United. I mean, besides Perth, you could pretty much...
Well, I don't know about that. Perth have beaten them this year.
in Perth, though, this is very, very surprising if Auckland drop points.
Could you imagine if Perth did the double on Auckland this season?
That would be insane. That would be absolutely insane. But, I mean, if Auckland drop points in that game, I reckon the APL should step in and just take him out of finals. They don't deserve to be there. I don't want to see him there, to be honest. But, I mean, no, like I said, those are really tough fixtures. But, again, it's due to their consistency, having that really... I think it's a 7-point buffer now on Western United. That gives them a bit of leverage, right, to drop a couple of games, and ultimately they've been rewarded for teams below them just dropping points, when they should be picking up basically 3 points. So it's for that reason that they deserve to be there. It looks very likely that they're going to continue to stay there and claim the Premier's play in their first season, which is a massive feat for the club. I think they deserve it. I mean, the fans, the turnout has been amazing this season. They've just provided something extra, haven't they, to the competition that, it's given something unique to the league. I mean, to see near sellout stadiums every second or so week, it's great to see from Auckland. So I hope they do do go all the way. Personally, if it's not victory, winning the championship, then Auckland. I'd love to see them to do it because they've just been a great success story under Steve Corica, and like you mentioned, like your Western United basically have to win all their games to ensure that Auckland, get those 9 points to seal it, but I just don't see it happening for Western United to go that perfect in a competition where it's so extremely tight. Like we've said it time and time again, results can go either way. It's going to be a tough ask, so I think Auckland do have it from here.
You would kind of just love it as a neutral, though, if they just dropped a few points and it went down to that final game.
Definitely.
Because I think we were all sort of built this season up to be like that with how close it has been at the top. But then every team that's tried to chase down Auckland has just tripped over themselves, right, and fallen back down. Adelaide did it, City did it, Western did it, but they're back up there now again. It's like... Yeah, it's kind of like we've built it all up to being this could come down to the final game of the season, guys. And it kind of feels like maybe it's not. And it requires this insane run from Western to do it. But yeah, it would be so nice to see because it just adds that little extra element, right, to the final game of the season, knowing that, the title's up for grabs. And there's nothing better in football than those sorts of situations.
That Auckland Western United game, that's the second last game of the season. So hopefully it's close enough that, I don't know, potentially if Western can take some points off, it'll make the title race a bit interesting with 1 day to go, with one match day to go.
Oh, 1 day to okay, sure.
Yeah.
Because I was just looking at the fixture now. That final week just has so much potential for drama if it all works out right. You got Melbourne City versus Sydney FC with the Sky Blues potentially on the brink of finals, and Melbourne City may be going for top 2, but it's only like a couple of losses here and there, and they could be on the brink as well. And you got the Bulls and Western Sydney who are kind of going to be in and around it as well. Of course, Western United v Auckland. Then you got the Mariners, the Raw, and the Phoenix Glory for the Australia Cup pre-playoffs, right? to try and get yourself out. So there's plenty of potential. But I guess we're just going to have to sit and wait to see exactly what the stakes will be on those games. Elsewhere in New Zealand, Costa Barbarouses, has broken the all-time league assist record, which actually kind of surprised me to learn that he was that far up. In the 2-2 draw against the Western Sydney Wanderers, he got to an all-time tally of 46, which clears Craig Goodwin in second place on 45. He's been a player, funnily enough, Jacob, that's been more known for goal scoring in the past 2 seasons. He's often been at the kind of pinnacle of that Wellington Phoenix attack, but it's the assists that he's been, broken the record for, which is pretty cool.
I was going to say, whenever I hear Costa Barbarouses, I think of, that pacey player who's going to put the ball in the back of the net. Not necessarily the one who's going to produce and provide for his teammates. But, I mean, I suppose he's been around in the league for such a long time that, of course, he's going to have built up a decent tally. And I think it goes to show that there is perhaps that underrated element to his game, right? That he is decent at creating chances for his teammates.
Especially when he used to be that, like, out-and-out winger, like in his victory days and stuff.
Proper, just get the ball out to him and put it in the box sort of. No, I mean, very well done to him. That's an incredible record. Obviously clearing one of the league's greatest wingers, Craig Goodwin. And Costa Barbarouses is up there with Goodwin as one of the league's greatest wingers as well. But now has that one up on him. So maybe that's going to be incentive for Goodwin to come back and try and reclaim his record or something. But maybe wishful thinking there. But no, Barbarouses he's been such a tremendous player for such a long time. And, he had a couple of down years there with the victory, but he's sort of not reinvented himself so much at the Phoenix as he sort of found his rhythm again. And he looks to be, playing some of his best football that he has done in a long time. So, no, fantastic achievement for him. And, he's a legend of the A-League and one of the players that, really we want to see more of, right? We want to see more of these players who are able to stick around in the A-League, but not just because, they're a known quantity, because they're good, and Barbarouses is one of those players who I feel like at his peak, there were points where he probably could have left and tried his hand elsewhere and, maybe would have never seen him again, but he stuck around and, he's gone on to become one of the league's greatest players and best attacking players in its history. So, yeah, it's a tremendous credit to him and the longevity that he's had over his career and the performance he's been able to put in consistently over those years. So, yeah, nothing but just huge congratulations from me for that.
Yeah, so he's been, as you say, he's one of these players that, has always had the potential, and he had a couple of years abroad, But I think he's a great example of what we hope that the league can be if it matures to a point where, yeah, of course it is a platform to young players to show what they're worth and go overseas, but also you can have a very good career just being in the A-League and be a very talented footballer and be fulfilled with a career in the A-League. And I think I'm looking at his record now. I believe it's 12th consecutive year between the Victory, Phoenix and Sydney FC. And he's, as you say, he's been a legend of the league, and congratulations to him. He, of course, Christian, is one of these players that was at the Phoenix previously, went away and came back and has had this really fruitful reunion under Giancarlo Italiano. One player that unfortunately hasn't is Marco Rojas. His season has kind of been curtailed by injury, and we learnt on Monday that he's been released. They've mutually terminated his contract. It just kind of has tragedy written all over it a little bit. It was supposed to be this really nice homecoming. Chiefy spoke plenty pre-season about how crucial he was going to be for the team moving forward, and we saw glimpses of that. He's somehow still second in assists on the season for Wellington Phoenix, despite how little football he's played. But, you know, his body unfortunately just wasn't up to it, and that'll be the end of his Wellington Phoenix stint again.
So that means Victory are going to be lined up to sign him for a 10th time.
I don't think so.
No, I mean, what is he now, 33? I think the body is really starting to break down, isn't it? You're seeing a lot of injuries now, even if at his time at Brisbane before he arrived at, another stint here at Wellington. And like you said, Italiano really had him centred around his project for this season. But like a lot of things, it just hasn't gone according to plan, and it just sort of sums up their season, basically. Third last on the table. They've just haven't been able to fire on all cylinders. And yeah, Rojas, when you have a player of his caliber not being able to get consistent minutes under his belt, it makes it difficult, especially in the final third. Obviously with Krayev leaving in the off-season as well, like to have those sorts of players leave. Who was the other one that left in the off-season?
Ben
Oscar
Old.
Zavada.
Yeah, Zavada. Yeah.
Zavada, like they've had, just so many people leave. And then to have injuries like this to a player like Rojas, it's a tough pill to swallow. When for Italiano, it's basically a case of, okay, basically scrap this season and start from scratch. But for him, there might not be enough time. The club might look into a different direction. Not that I think they will. I think they'll stick with Italiano at least for another season. I'm not too sure what his contract is at the moment, how many years he's got left, but I think he's built up enough credit in the bank to warrant another season, because we saw last season with that finals run what he can do, what he's capable of achieving with the side with limited funds and resources. So in terms of Rojas, it's going to be interesting. Does he move to another A-League club? I don't know what he does now. We see so many players recycle though in the A-League still, and Rojas could be one of those.
But is anybody gonna? The thing is, yes, but is anybody gonna take a punt on him? Right? That's kind of what the Phoenix did this year.
Depends what club it is.
And it's like, so you reckon? That does kind of scream Brisbane.
It just depends. Like a Brisbane or a Newcastle Jets, a club like that where they'll just pick someone up like that. They know that they've got the talent. Yes, they're taking a bit of a gamble and a risk with his injury history, but it's a player that for them, like they could see as a benefit, they can get the most out of him. It's just that big if that's attached to him, right? So, like personally, if I was a club owner and a manager, I wouldn't go for him.
No.
But it just depends on what you want, right?
Yeah, because you just got to look at this season, right? And it's like when he's been on the pitch, he has been good and he's been key for the side, but he's not been on the pitch. And for a player, that's just you've got to be out there on the pitch every week to be able to have an impact. And you go, it's a big if, his injury history. I don't think it's an if. I think it's a known factor at this point that he's going to spend most of the season out injured. I just look, it's a shame because he is an incredibly talented player, and you look back at some of those highlights from the early days at the Victory and you think, whoa, what a player he was. But this happens to players. They get injured and they just can't seem to shake it. And it's a shame that it's happened to such a talented player, but it's football. And I just don't think that there's any clubs out there that would take the risk at this point in time, knowing that he's probably not going to be healthy enough for him to have an actual impact over the course of a season.
Just on Italiano as well, I believe that this is the end of his contract at the end of this season. So That is an interesting decision for Phoenix fans for the Phoenix board, because obviously the fan sentiment has swinged dramatically this season. It was, hail to the Chief last season, and then all of a sudden we were chiefy out in some sections of Sky Stadium this season. So, yeah, it's a big turn for sure. Finally, just on MacArthur and Newcastle on Friday night, just a crazy game. Poletti said on Friday that their worst-case scenario was that this match ends up in a draw, because it is the exact opposite of what both teams needed in this situation. They're both chasing wins and chasing 3 points to try and push themselves just towards the edge of that finals top 6 and just give themselves a crack. Braces to Eli Adams and Harry Sawyer in this game. It was very dramatic late equaliser from Sawyer. But Christian, just 1 point each does not do any team any good whatsoever.
I think this hurts a bit more for MacArthur than it does Newcastle, right? I mean, I'm just looking at the table now. If MacArthur got that extra 2 points, they're 3 points behind Adelaide. MacArthur have a better goal difference than Adelaide by 3. Like, they were in the hunt, right, if they got these 3 points. Whereas the Jets, I still think, yes, they are in some pretty good form, albeit they lost 6-2 to Western United before the international break. I just thought MacArthur, despite the problems that they've had in January, they would have had just a bit more in terms of the points total to mount a bit of a late surge. But yeah, this draw sort of completely blows that out the window. The draw was, Poletti was right, the worst possible result for these two sides. You have to sort of write them both off now. I can't see any of these two teams really, making a charge to the
Which is a
finals.
shame, right? Because it felt like Newcastle were going to be something exciting perhaps in the back end of the season to push on, but it's just another Perth from last year, although perhaps not as apocalyptic at the end of the season as Perth were.
Well, there's still a few games to go.
There are. They could. Well, I don't see the Jets players giving up in the same sort of way that it seemed like the Perth players did, to be honest. They seem a pretty committed bunch. Robbie Stanton, as much as, obviously there's questions over his future at the club, you can tell he wants the best from the players and the best performances that they can give. So I don't see it happening, to be honest.
How much will they be praying for a draw between Sydney and Adelaide next up? They'll be desperate for them to share the points and give them just a bit of a window.
The tiniest chance possible.
Yeah.
Do you want a draw? Or do you want
Or do you want
Sydney
Adelaide to
win?
lose?
Yeah. And then they become even. I don't know, because then like the market to get you into finals with a draw would be 34 rather than 33 still.
But then you've still got two teams that you need. I
don't know.
Sort of.
It'll play out.
We've just said that their hopes are done, and now we're discussing the potential, things that need to happen for it to,
It's the craziness of the A-League.
Yeah, I think you're right on the Jets, though. I mean, you look at their playing squad and you look at the way, the likes of Clayton Taylor, Lockie Rose, have been playing, Eli Adams, even, Noah James in goal. Mark Natter's been a consistent player for them for a while now.
Gosh, who's the Japanese import they got as well?
Kota Mizunuma.
Mizunuma, yeah.
Things are looking up for the Newcastle Jets, and it's been widely reported that future will not be under Robbie Stanton and that Mark Milligan is heavily favoured to take over. He's just left to go have this assistant role over in Malaysia, but there's clauses in coaches' contracts all the time. If he was offered a head coaching role, then maybe there's something in there that says he is allowed to go away and take that. So he seems like the guy that's being talked about most for the Jets. But yeah, definitely optimism, I think, is the prevailing theme for them looking forward. Hello, everyone. We got a little bit mixed up in terms of a couple of different recording sessions today, so we never actually got to recording an intro or an outro, I should say, for you. So here I am, just to say goodbye. We appreciate your company as always. One final reminder: Round Ball 10 for a little discount on the kits. Today is the last day you'll be able to buy them. But we appreciate your company in today's podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll see you on Friday.